They were wrong. It wasn't hate that lit the fire. It was memory. And memory burns longer than wood. Dr. Elias Wren didn't believe in ghosts. Not in the literal sense. He believed in paper, in ink, in the slow decay of truth between yellowed pages and cracked bindings. His faith was in records, footnotes, the quiet, orderly death of things left unread for too long. For him, history was a wound best catalogued, not reopened. So when he entered room B17 of the American Religious History Collection, he didn't expect to bleed. The air inside was wrong. Not cold, not musty, dead. He paused in the doorway. The overhead light flickered once, then held. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that sits heavy in the lungs. He'd worked here for over a decade. Published 6 books. Lectured across the country. Wrote long, elegant arguments about Puritan theology, colonial martyrdom, anti-Catholic violence in early America. But none of it prepared him for what he found on the shelf marked Misc. Piari, 1835. The box didn't belong. It was wrapped in linen, faded brittle. The label was handwritten in uneven French. Saint Elira, Confession, 1834. Do not open without clerical consent. No accession number. No archive stamp. No catalog card. He stared at it for a long time, then broke the seal. The wax snapped like bone. Black, dry, ancient. The linen peeled away, releasing a bitter metallic scent. Inside the box, red velvet was burned at the edges, curled brittle. Something had scorched it from within. On top of the velvet sat a crucifix, rusted, twisted, warped as though gripped by a hand that died holding it. Beneath that a journal, thick, leather-bound, the edges singed, the spine split. He opened to the first page. Ce que s'y souviennent brûlent aussi. Those who remember burn too. He should have stopped. Instead, he stayed. He closed the blinds, locked the door, sat beneath the dim lamp and read. The journal wasn't written by a scholar. It wasn't organized. It wasn't sane. The script shifted. The grammar fractured. The voice, raw, intimate, fevered, belonged to a nun. Sister Agnes Marie de Lambert. She wasn't writing history. She was confessing. Surveillance footage shows Elias unmoving for over 4 hours. But at 2:11 a.m., he begins to whisper. First in Latin, then in French, then something else. A language the software couldn't recognize. His hands begin to twitch. His lips bleed. His eyes stay fixed to the pages. The light flickers. Then the camera cuts out for 13 seconds. When it returns, Elias is gone. No signs of struggle. No blood. No fingerprints. The journal is open. The page freshly written. His notebook sat beside it. Half-filled. Frantic, unfinished lines. Latin phrases. Sketches of crucifixes with reversed arms. Drawings of a woman with no eyes. Security broke the door the next morning. The room was freezing. No lights. No signs of entry or exit. The only trace of Elias was the scent. Burnt wax and iron. He was declared missing. Later, presumed dead. The university issued a statement about unfortunate disappearance during research-related travel. No one questioned it. No one wanted to. But someone archived the journal. Someone transcribed it. And someone leaked it. In the weeks that followed, 2 graduate assistants resigned. One fled the state. Another was hospitalized with unexplained seizures. A visiting Jesuit, who had been brought in to review the Latin, wrote a single-margin note beside the title page. This is not history. This is a binding. The first true translation begins here. The confession of Sister Agnes Marie de Lambert, the last survivor of the Ursuline convent of Charlestown. The road to Charlestown was thick with mud. The coach wheels groaned as they dragged through the ruts, horses straining beneath the gray weight of the sky. Sister Agnes Marie de Lambert sat stiff-backed inside, eyes fixed on the foxlit window. Her hands, folded neatly in her lap, had gone pale from tension. She hadn't slept since Quebec. Every time she closed her eyes, the silence followed her, pressed into her skull, breathing behind her ears. She hadn't asked for reassignment. No one ever did. The convent in Charlestown, an Ursuline house on the edge of the Protestant North, was known only in whispers. Among the sisters, it was called La Maison du Silence, the House of Silence, a place for ruined women, for inconvenient sisters, for the shamed and the watched. Agnes had not yet turned 30, but her reputation traveled faster than her prayers. A student who died under strange circumstances, a priest with too soft words. Nothing proven, everything felt. The coach lurched as they passed through rusted gates. The convent stood like a grave marker at the edge of the hill. 3 stories of stone, pressed into the sky like a wound trying to seal. Moss crept up the walls. The towers leaned in toward one another, whispering secrets too old for language. No sound came from within. No bells, no hymns, no children's voices. Only the air. Still, too still. Sister Avellini met her at the door, tall, bone-thin, and pale in a way that looked deliberate. Her habit was spotless. Her eyes were storms. She wore no crucifix, only a small silver pin at her collar, shaped like a weeping eye. "You're late," she said. Her voice had no color. Agnes bowed her head. Follow." She turned and vanished into the dark hallway. No blessing, no greeting, just orders. Agnes obeyed. Inside, the convent breathed a different kind of cold, not the chill of air, but of memory. The floors creaked once, then went still, as if the building had noticed her and grown quiet. The candles and sconces flickered without wind. The walls pressed in too close. The stone smelled of rust and prayer. "You are here to teach," said Avellini as they passed through a narrow corridor. "And to serve. You do not ask about what came before. You do not go below the chapel. You do not speak to the girls after dark." Agnes opened her mouth, but Avellini raised a single finger. "These rules are not negotiable." They stepped into the Mother Superior's office. It was windowless, lined with books bound in vellum, arranged by size, not title. There was no crucifix on the wall, only a painting above the desk of a burning nun, her arms outstretched, her face caught between agony and worship. Beneath it a name, Saint Elira Laporte. Agnes frowned. "I've never heard of her." "You will," said Avellini. Her cell was on the 2nd floor. Small, clean, too warm. The crucifix above the bed was hung upside down. Agnes reached to fix it. Her fingers burned at the touch. Not heat, recognition. She pulled away. That night, she dreamed of humming. Not music. Not quite. A child's voice. Soft, broken, whispering beneath the floorboards. A lullaby with no words. She sat upright, listened. It continued for a few seconds more, then stopped. The silence afterward was worse. She opened the door to her cell. The hallway was dark, empty, but something was different. The air trembled. She followed the sound toward the chapel. Its great doors stood open a crack. She pushed them gently. The room inside was dark, cold. The stained glass windows looked different at night, like eyes, watching. No candles were lit. The altar was untouched. She turned to leave, and saw herself, reflected in the glass. But her eyes were gone. and her mouth was smiling. She ran back to her room, locked the door. Her Bible was no longer on the desk. It lay on the floor, pages open. Exodus 32. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with a graving tool, and made a golden calf. And they said, These are your gods, O Israel. The next morning, at breakfast, the girls ate in silence. Their eyes were hollow, their movements mechanical. None of them smiled. None spoke. One girl, red hair, dirt under her fingernails, slipped something into Agnes's sleeve, a folded square of cloth. When she opened it later, the message was stitched in tiny black thread. Do not remember. She looked for the girl, but no one else remembered her. There's no red-haired girl, said the sister on duty. The rest of the day passed like a dream. Recitation, prayer, instruction. But every time Agnes passed the chapel, she felt something pulling. A thread wrapped around her ribs, tugging downward, toward the altar, toward the floor beneath it. That night, she visited Sister Madeline, an elder, half-mad, but sharper than she let on. Who was Elira? Agnes asked. Madeline's eyes narrowed. Not canonized. But she has a painting. She has a grave, said Madeline. That is not the same. Was she martyred? No, she was used. As a door, as a silence. Agnes blinked. I don't understand. You will, said the old nun, if you stay too long. On the third night, she woke to find the floor wet. A perfect circle of water beneath her bed. No rain, no leak, just a circle, and footprints. Bare, muddy, leading from her door to her bed and back again. She followed them. They led to the chapel. The door was ajar. Inside, one candle burned on the altar. The crucifix had changed. Christ's face was gone. In its place the woman's. Eyes weeping wax. Mouth open in silent scream. She fled. In the morning, the altar was normal again, but a page from her Bible was missing, torn, and left on her desk. The verse circled in ash. She made them drink it, mixed with the dust of the fire. That afternoon, Avellini summoned her. Agnes expected rebuke. Instead, the Mother Superior handed her an iron key. You are ready. Agnes stared. For what? Avellini smiled. Just slightly. To descend. That night, Agnes stood before the chapel again. The wind outside was still. The fog kissed the windows. She held the key in her hand, staring at the altar. The chapel was no longer a place of worship. It was an opening, a wound, and she had just been asked to go inside. The iron key felt heavier than it should have. Not large, not ornate, just a length of cold metal, humming faintly in Agnes's palm like it had a pulse of its own. She stood at the altar in the chapel, alone, long past curfew. The great wooden doors behind her were locked. No wind crept through the stained glass, and yet the air in the room moved, slow and circular, like breath from a mouth she could not see. The candle on the altar did not flicker. It stood upright and still, like it had forgotten how to die. Agnes placed the key at the foot of the crucifix, just where the carved feet of Christ touched the wood. Her fingers were trembling. The key turned with resistance, like something inside had to be convinced to open. And then, with a long, shuddering click, the altar moved. Stone ground against stone. The floor beneath it split with a hiss. A trapdoor opened, perfectly circular, its edges worn smooth by hands that hadn't touched it in decades, or centuries. A gust of air exhaled from the dark beneath. Not warm, not cold, just ancient. Dust, incense, something sweet and rotted. A memory of sanctity left too long to ferment. She lowered herself into the spiral staircase, holding a small lantern in one hand. Her other hand brushed the damp stone wall for balance. The keyhole clicked shut above her. The altar resealed itself. She was underground. Alone. Sealed in. The spiral went on far too long. Far deeper than any chapel foundation should allow. The walls began plain. But soon, carvings appeared. Symbols she didn't recognize. Crosses with missing arms. Eyes. Hands. Etchings of Latin that shifted between verses and warnings. She waits beneath. Not saint. Not martyr. Door. Then the carvings stopped. And the stains began. Black streaks. Dried. Burned. Dripping down the walls in long, straight trails. Some curved, as if fingers had scraped the stone on their way down. A pressure built behind her eyes. Her breath shortened. The lantern dimmed, sputtered, but did not die. At last, the steps ended in a wide, circular chamber. Too smooth. Too symmetrical. Too silent. Candles had long since melted along the rim, wax-hardened like bones. In the center stood a pedestal. Small. Square. Draped in faded crimson cloth. The fabric sagged with weight. Agnes stepped closer. The air thickened. Her pulse beat in her throat. Her mouth had gone dry. She knew what it was. The relic. The cloth wasn't dusty. It was too clean, as if it had been changed recently, or never aged. She reached forward, barely breathing, and lifted it. Beneath it sat a coffin-shaped container. Not gold. Not adorned. Iron. Thick and scorched, edges sealed in wax as black as pitch. It wasn't a relic meant for veneration. It was a container meant to hold something. A single word carved into the lid. Elira. Below it in jagged clawed Latin. Non dimittet. She will not forgive. The iron box pulsed with warmth. Wrong warmth. Not from the room. From within. Agnes reached toward it and paused. In the dark metal, she saw herself. But not quite. The reflection blinked. Moved faster than she did. The face in the iron was older. Hollowed. Bleeding from the mouth. Fingernails torn. Skin stretched taut. Lips pulled into a smile her own mouth did not make. She gasped and stepped back. Behind her, footsteps. She turned. Nothing. No one there. But the shadows had lengthened. The chamber looked larger. Impossible. The walls stretched wider now. The symbols glowed faint orange, pulsing in rhythm. Her lantern hissed. And then the voices began. Not spoken. Not heard. Felt. They poured through her skin like fog, whispering in circles. Round and round her spine. One name repeated, again and again. Agnes. Agnes Marie de Lambert. Agnes of Fire. Agnes of the Gate. She fell to her knees. Hands over her ears. But the whispers were already inside. Behind her, the iron box opened. It didn't break. It unfolded. Like flesh remembering how to breathe. Inside was not bone. It was a face. A woman's face. Perfectly preserved. Skin pale and waxy. Mouth sewn shut with gold thread. Eyes replaced with red wax, still dripping, as if freshly poured. The face didn't rot. It waited. And Agnes knew. This was no relic of a saint. This was a prison. The woman inside had not been venerated. She had been sealed. Elira. Say a name only. The chamber vibrated. A low hum crawled through the stone. The wax eyes stared without seeing. The stitched mouth opened. No sound. Just silence, so complete. It crushed the air from Agnes's lungs. Her heartbeat stopped. In that silence, visions crashed into her skull. Flames. The chapel ablaze. Nuns clawing their own faces. Children convulsing in prayer. Walls bleeding verses. A woman tall, burning, mouth open in a scream of smoke, offering a chalice full of blood. Then she saw herself. Kneeling. Hands lifted. Mouth wide. Her voice. Chanting in words she didn't know. 3 fingers missing. The silence snapped. Her lantern flared. The relic sealed itself again, as if nothing had happened. But her mouth bled. Her fingers burned. Her breath was no longer her own. She ran up the spiral, stumbling, sobbing, burst back into the chapel, collapsed in the aisle, coughing blood. Above her, the crucifix had changed. It was no longer Christ. It was her, Elira, veiled, mouth open, wax dripping from the sockets. Mother Avellini was waiting at the far end. Her eyes glinted in the dark. "You opened it," she said. Agnes couldn't speak. "You've seen her now," Avellini continued. "You've heard her silence." She walked toward her. "Calm, reverent, inevitable. You understand your purpose." They bled from their noses first. Small things. Just a few specks on handkerchiefs, sleeves, the edge of a book. At first, it seemed like nothing. The air was dry. The convent was old. Nosebleeds happened. But the pattern formed quickly. By the end of the week, 9 girls had bled in the same hour. It always happened after evening prayer. No cries. No panic. Just quiet girls, standing still in pews, as blood dripped soundlessly from their nostrils. Some wiped it away and continued praying. Others didn't seem to notice. Agnes watched from the back of the chapel. Her own hands still bore faint burns. Her fingertips had blistered since the descent, and no balm helped. She kept her sleeves long. Her voice, once strong, had grown distant. She hadn't spoken to anyone in days, not even to God. Each night she returned to her cell and found something changed. Once, it was a page torn from her Bible, placed beneath her pillow. Another time, it was hair, a braid, wrapped in linen, still warm. On the third night, she woke to find her door ajar. Not wide, just cracked, as if someone had stood there, watched, and decided not to enter yet. The girls had begun to hum. Soft, almost pleasant, the kind of melody a child might sing to herself while braiding string or brushing her doll's hair. But the rhythm was wrong, as if it bent around something unseen. They all hummed the same tune, but none claimed to know it. Agnes stopped asking. At meals, the girls sat in rows, hands folded, lips sealed unless prompted. They chewed slowly, deliberately. None made a sound, except the red-haired girl. She had returned. Agnes saw her in the hallway after dinner, standing perfectly still beside the chapel door. Her eyes were open, wide, empty. Her dress was torn at the hem. Her fingernails were red, not with polish, with something older. The girl blinked slowly, then smiled. Agnes opened her mouth, but the girl vanished. Turned the corner. Gone. Later that night, a knock came at her door. 3 taps. Then nothing. She opened it. A cloth doll lay on the floor. Its face had been removed. In its place, stitched with black thread, was the word, "Open." Agnes's voice cracked. What am I?" Avellini leaned close. "You are the next seal." The candlelight vanished, and the silence returned. The next morning, the girls weren't in the classroom. Agnes searched the halls. Silence. She passed Sister Juliet near the stairwell. The woman's eyes were swollen, her lips chapped, raw, as if she hadn't drunk water in days. She carried a book upside down and muttered nonsense beneath her breath. "Where are the students?" Agnes asked. Juliet blinked slowly, then smiled. "Gone to the garden." There was no garden. At least, not one she had ever seen. But when she followed the stone corridor that led beyond the dormitories, she found a rusted door, one that hadn't been open in decades, judging by the rot. It stood ajar. The air beyond it smelled sweet. And wrong. The convent's hidden courtyard was no garden. It was a graveyard of vines. Thorn-covered plants clawed their way up stone walls. The soil pulsed beneath her feet, dark and too soft. A single tree stood in the center, its bark split, hollow, bleeding red sap. The girls stood in a ring around it, barefoot, heads bowed, their lips moved, silent, chanting. Agnes stepped closer. They did not look up. The youngest girl's hands were bleeding, palms cut, She held them out in front of her, letting blood drip onto the tree roots. The girl next to her did the same. One by one, they offered blood to the soil. Not screaming, not crying. Calm, rhythmic, like they'd done it before. Agnes shouted, "Stop! What are you doing?" The girls did not move. The chanting continued. Agnes reached for the nearest one, a dark-haired girl with a vacant stare, and shook her. The girl's mouth opened. No sound came out, but her eyes rolled back. Her lips moved, forming one name. Alira. Agnes stumbled back. The chanting stopped. All the girls turned at once. Dozens of small, silent faces, all smiling. Then, just as suddenly, they collapsed, falling where they stood. Their blood soaked the roots of the tree. Agnes screamed, but no one came. Agnes dragged one of the girls back inside. She wasn't dead, just emptied. Eyes open, breath shallow, mouth stained red. Infirmary beds were full within the hour. 9 of them wouldn't wake. 3 murmured in broken French, Latin, and something that scraped at the edges of language. Avellini said nothing. When Agnes confronted her, the woman only looked up from her desk and said, "The roots need blood." "What the hell does that mean?" Agnes demanded, but Avellini only smiled. "You asked to teach. Now you will learn." Later that night, someone left a package on Agnes's pillow, wrapped in white cloth. Inside it, a wax mask, shaped like her own face, mouth sealed, eyes hollow. Beneath it a note. "You've been seen. She knows you now." Agnes fell to her knees. The walls began to hum. Somewhere deep below, a door creaked. Not open, but ready. The wax mask cracked in her hands, split down the center. Red wax spilled from the mouth like blood. That night, the chapel bells rang. No one had pulled the rope, and all the crucifixes in the convent turned themselves upside down. Agnes no longer heard her own footsteps. The halls absorbed them. No echo, no creak, just stillness. The walls seemed softer now, like they had grown thick with something alive. Not flesh, not bone, something in between, something listening. Since the night in the chamber, since the face in the iron, the convent had changed. It wasn't the building. It was what moved inside it. The silence grew heavier each day. Not empty, but pregnant, like the air was full of someone else's breath, waiting to be exhaled. The girls walked as always. Ate, slept, sat and rose, but something inside them had faded. Their eyes didn't follow movement anymore. Their mouths no longer moved unless prompted. And even then their voices came slow, dragged from the throat. They were being emptied. Not violently, not with blood and knives, with reverence, with worship. Taken. It began with the silence, then the nosebleeds, then the singing in their sleep, and then the dreams. All of them, dreaming the same thing. A figure beneath the floor. A woman, tall, wrapped in veils that clung to her like wet paper. Her hands bound in red threads, her feet not touching the ground. The girls called her Mother, Mother of Silence. Agnes saw her too. Every night now. She stood in an endless hall of stone, candles flickering against walls that had no edges. And at the far end the veiled woman waited, still, praying, watching. Agnes could never see her face. Only her hands, always bleeding, always folded. The moment Agnes tried to speak in the dream, her voice would vanish, like it had never existed. The woman never moved, never spoke, but her presence surged forward, always faster than Agnes could run, and then she would wake, covered in sweat, mouth dry, chest aching. Every time. Some mornings, she found red wax at the corners of her eyes. Once, she woke to find her fingernails cracked, dirt beneath them. She hadn't left her cell. She hadn't gone anywhere. And yet, Her hand said otherwise. One morning, she found words above her bed, not written in ink, carved deep into the stone wall in letters too jagged for calm hands. Mother is almost whole. She didn't remember writing it, but her palms were cut open. The chapel smelled like wax and iron. The light was low, just one candle on the altar, flickering, bent by no wind, as if the flame were shivering, trying to warn what it could not say. Avellini stood at the front. She did not turn when Agnes entered. Her eyes were closed, lips moving, praying, but there was no sound, not a whisper, not a breath. Agnes remained at the threshold. She didn't trust the floor. "You knew," Agnes said. Her voice was softer than she expected. Avellini didn't react. "You knew about the relic," Agnes continued. "About the tree, about the blood, about the girls." Still silence. Agnes stepped forward, each footfall heavy, dragged, as if the very ground hated her weight. "You fed them to her." At that, Avellini opened her eyes. They weren't normal. The whites were clouded. Veins spread across them like lightning trapped in glass. Her pupils dilated too wide, too still. They reflected the flame behind her like mirrors. "She is not death," Avellini whispered. Agnes swallowed. "She is return. She is the pause before the scream, the stillness after the fire, the breath between the last word and the first cut." Her voice was calm, collected, too calm. "She is the mother of silence, the unspoken wound." Agnes clenched her fists. "Their children." Avellini smiled, a slow, tired smile. It did not reach her eyes. And what is more fitting? What does a mother deserve, if not her children? A long pause. Then she said, "Children are vessels, empty, innocent, perfect." Agnes shook her head. "You're mad." "No," Avellini said. "I'm devout." She stepped away from the altar, slowly, reverently. "I was shown this path decades ago, long before your time. The convent was not built by saints. It was built as a lock, a gate, a cradle." Agnes stepped back. Her spine brushed cold stone. "You think this place was for worship?" Avellini asked softly. "No, it was always for containment. We sang hymns not to praise, but to bind. We prayed not to God, but to keep her asleep." She reached beneath her robes, pulled something out. A candle. Short, misshapen, made of dark red wax. It dripped, but the wax was warm, wet, fresh. "Do you know what this is?" Avellini asked. Agnes didn't answer. "She made it. From one of them. Her breath is inside it." She placed it in Agnes's hand. The wax stuck to her skin. It pulsed. "You open the box," Avellini whispered. "You breathe her name. You carry her mark now. You are not separate from this. You are part of it, a link in the chain." Agnes's voice cracked. "I won't help you." "You already have," Avellini said, and with that, the flame behind her died. That night, the candle sat on her desk, still warm, still bleeding from the wick. It did not smell like wax. It smelled sweet, like old honey and something beneath it. Copper, dust, blood. Agnes sat before it, eyes wide, mouth dry. She did not light it. It burned anyway. The flame rose on its own, quiet and steady. There was no smoke. She tried to pray. The words would not come. Her mouth moved, but there was no sound. It was like her voice had been taken. She reached for her journal, wrote to keep her mind grounded, but the pen slipped. Her hand moved on its own, line after line, symbols she didn't know, words that weren't hers. Latin, French, a third tongue she had never learned, yet somehow knew. Elira, Lambert, Agnes. Silence. She dropped the pen. Her hand kept moving. She watched her own fingers twist, twitch, dig into the page, smearing ink and blood. Her other hand trembled. Her eyes burned. Her pulse slowed. The air in the cell grew thick, damp. She could hear something wet crawling behind the walls. And then her lantern hissed. It flared, flickered, died. Only the red candle remained, its flame now blue. The room bent inward. Shadows lengthened. Her bed stretched tall and thin like a tombstone. The crucifix on the wall turned upside down. She whispered, "No." But her voice was not hers. It was low, hollow, echoed. She pressed her hands to her ears. The sound kept coming. From inside, the candle's flame snapped. Something moved beneath the floorboards. A pull formed in her chest, like her soul was being reeled in on a thread she couldn't cut. Then her mouth opened, but she did not scream. She sang, a lullaby, soft, uneven. The melody rose and fell like a broken prayer. It came from deep in her body, like her lungs had been taught before birth. As she sang, blood ran from her nose. It dripped down her lips, onto the pages she had written. And on the final page, the last words burned themselves into the paper. She didn't write them. They appeared in thick black ink. Mother has returned. Her body seized. She collapsed to the floor. The candle flared. And then silence. Not emptiness. Presence. A breath filled the room. Not hers. A second. Then a third. And then soft, bare footsteps. Behind her. She turned her head. Slowly. Too slowly. A figure stood at the edge of her bed. Veiled. Bleeding. Her hands folded in prayer. Her face hidden behind red wax. Agnes tried to speak. Nothing came. The figure knelt and whispered without lips. You opened the gate. Agnes closed her eyes, but the voice remained. Inside her skull. Inside her bones. Inside her blood. You are no longer the key. The voice said. You are the door. Agnes did not sleep. She sat by the window, unmoving, watching the night spill across the courtyard like ink. The candle had burned itself out hours ago, but the red stain remained. Melted wax had soaked into the desk and hardened into veins. They pulsed when she touched them. She didn't touch them anymore. The floor creaked without cause. Every hour, the bells rang. No hands pulled the ropes. No wind stirred the trees. By morning, she could feel it. In her skin, in her breath. The air tasted thick. When she stepped out of her cell, the hallway was dark. Not dim, not shadowed. Dark, as if the walls had drunk the light. She passed no one. The doors were closed. Locked, but something behind them moved. Scraped. Wept. She heard a voice whisper her name from under the floorboards. Not loudly. Just once. Soft. Agnes. She did not answer. She knew it wouldn't help. In the chapel, she found Avellini kneeling before the altar. Her hands were open, palms up. Blood pooled in them. Not dripping. Flowing. Her face was hidden beneath a veil of red lace. It stuck to her mouth when she breathed. Agnes approached slow. The altar had changed. The crucifix had fallen. In its place, a wooden confessional stood. It hadn't been there yesterday. Old. Rotten. Covered in wax. The curtains were torn and stained. Avellini did not move. Only whispered over and over. She listens now. She listens now. She listens now. Agnes stepped past her. Her hand brushed the side of the confessional. It burned. She hissed, recoiling. The surface was warm, like flesh. It pulsed once beneath her palm before going still. Then the door opened. Not by her hand. Slow. Wide. Welcoming. Inside, nothing. Just a small, blood-dark bench. And a single word carved into the back panel. Confess. The door closed behind her. Not slammed. Not dragged. Just shut, like it had always meant to. Inside the confessional, there was no light. Not even from cracks in the wood. She tried to breathe, but the air was thick. Sweet and rotting. like flowers buried too long. Then a sound. Movement. Someone else had entered the opposite side. The thin, slotted barrier separating the booths flickered with shadows. Agnes leaned forward. Her mouth opened, but she didn't know what to say. And then it came. A voice. Not loud. Not soft. Calm. Older than stone. Confess. Agnes didn't recognize it as human. Not entirely. It was too dry. Too deep. It vibrated in the floor beneath her knees. I didn't mean to open it, she said. The voice replied. You did. I didn't know. You called her. Agnes's throat tightened. Her heart pounded. But the words kept coming from her lips. Unstoppable. I dreamed of her. I saw her eyes. I thought it was madness. But it wasn't. I touched the box. I heard her name in the dark. The voice remained still. Who is she? Agnes asked. Silence. Then, she is the silence between prayers, the mother of the wound, the breath before the blade, the one before the cross. Agnes's skin crawled. She is older than confession. The walls of the box pulsed. Breathe. Agnes felt heat rise from the floor. She has no church, the voice said. She is the church. Agnes swallowed. Why me? Because you believed. Agnes trembled. I believed in God. No, the voice said. You believed in doors. She wanted to scream, but her mouth would not open. She felt her back arch. Her spine twisted. From behind the slotted wood, a hand reached through. Not made of flesh. Thin, veined, bone white. It brushed her forehead, and her eyes rolled back. She awoke in the sacristy. The candlelight flickered overhead. Her body was cold, soaked in sweat. Her arms bore cuts she didn't remember. Symbols had been traced into her skin, not with ink, with fire. On the table beside her, a page lay open. It had been torn from an old Bible. The page was scorched, but the name at the top remained. Saint Illyra of the Broken Veil. Canonized 1211. Struck from record 1278. She sat up, heart thudding. Saint. She flipped the page. Below the name, a drawing, faded and crude, showed a woman in robes. Her face veiled. Her hands folded. Her wrists were bound in red. Agnes had seen this woman before. In her dreams. In the floor. In the mirror. She had never stopped seeing her. She turned the page again. A line had been circled in what looked like dried blood. Her confession split the earth. Her silence ended the plague. Her mouth was sewn shut by the priests of Rome, but the children still heard her. Agnes felt sick. This was no myth, no metaphor. Illyra was real, not a legend, a prison, a god bound in flesh, and she was breaking free. At the edge of the room, the candle flared. Avellini stood in the doorway. Her robes were soaked in something black. She was the first to bleed for us, Avellini said softly. And now, the last will open for her. Agnes rose, shaking. I didn't agree to this. Avellini smiled. You sang. Agnes's throat burned. Her voice had changed. It echoed now, even when she whispered. She is in you, Avellini said, and pointed at the page again. Agnes read the final line. When the red confessional opens, she will walk again, not as memory, but as mother. She didn't remember rising, didn't remember the ascent through the tunnels, only the sound, a low, endless note that curled in her ears like smoke, a hum without breath, a hymn without mercy. Agnes walked barefoot. The wax had fused to her soles like skin. Her hands were trembling, but they no longer bled. Her cuts had been sealed, not healed. Bound. Above her, the convent breathed. The stone groaned. The pipes sighed. Doors opened without touch. She passed the dormitories. The doors were wide now. Inside, The girls no longer slept. They stood in rows, facing the walls, hands at their sides, veils over their heads. Each veil was marked with a red cross. Not painted, burned in. They didn't move, not even when she passed. But Agnes heard them whisper. Not to her. To her. Elira. The mother returned. In the chapel, the red confessional had changed again. It was no longer a box. It was a mouth. A massive, living wound carved from wood, lined with waxen teeth that trembled when she approached. Inside, the seat had become a throne, made of bones, human, stacked and fused and twisted into a high back, wrapped in red silk like intestines. On it sat no one. Not yet, but the shape of her had begun to appear. A figure pressed into the fabric, not quite formed, not yet awake, but close, too close. Avellini stood beside it, weeping. Her veil was gone. Her eyes were hollow. Her hands, blackened from fire. She is ready, she said softly, but not complete. Agnes did not speak. Words no longer belonged to her. They belonged to the voice, to the choir, to Mother. Avellini reached out and touched Agnes's face. Your body will burn, but your voice will remain. You are the last string in the throat of God. Behind them, the girls began to move. Slow, silent. Each one stepped forward, one by one, toward the altar. Their mouths opened, and from inside, red wax poured, down their chins, onto their chests, onto the floor. The wax moved like a tide. It slithered toward the confessional, feeding it. Agnes felt her knees buckle. She fell forward, onto the stone, and then she saw, not with eyes, with memory, with blood. She saw Strasbourg, 1518, the first girl, dancing, alone, then dozens, hundreds, their feet bleeding, eyes wild, voices gone. But what they danced to was not music. It was silence. It was her, Elira, buried beneath the old church, mouth sewn shut, dreaming, starving. The dancers moved to wake her. Priests tried to stop them. They failed. The city bled. The bells rang without hands. The nuns sang through broken jaws. And then, just before the final veil was torn, someone sealed her. Not with holy words, with a name. Agnes had spoken it, and now she had undone it. She woke on the floor. The girls had stopped moving. The wax had risen to the altar. The throne pulsed, and the shape in the silk was no longer faint. It had a mouth now, and it was smiling. That night, the cathedral doors opened, not by key, not by hand. They opened because something ancient had breathed beneath them. The town below felt it. Dogs howled. Horses bolted. Windows shattered without wind. At the convent gates, figures gathered. Villagers, priests, men with torches. Rumors had spread fast of screams, of red light pouring through stained glass. They came to stop it. They came too late. Inside, the chapel echoed with song. No voices, only hums. Endless, low, the kind of sound that lives behind walls. On the altar, Agnes knelt. She had not eaten in days. She had not needed to. The wax sustained her. It lived inside her now. Her throat was a tunnel. Her breath was not hers. And still she sang. The doors burst open. Men rushed in, crosses held high. The song stopped. Only for a second. Then came the scream. But not from Agnes. Not from the nuns. From the walls. They howled. Cracked. Split. Red wax poured down like blood from the ceiling. It struck the men. Burned their skin. Filled their mouths. Fused their jaws. They dropped. Writhing. Blind. Avellini watched from the pulpit. Her eyes had been replaced with waxen beads. Her mouth sewn shut with rosary wire. but her smile was peaceful. "They cannot stop her," she whispered. "She is already inside the world." The throne behind the altar now held her fully. Veiled, silent, hands folded, feet not touching the ground. And when Agnes stood, she did not move like a woman. She floated, arms out, eyes closed. The hymn began again, but this time, words returned, ancient, forgotten, fused from dead tongues. The wax reacted. It reached the broken men, and from their open throats they began to sing, unwilling, unified, a new choir. The throne of teeth was full. The cathedral pulsed. Every candle burned blue, and through the stained glass behind the altar, the face of Elira pressed outward. Not a vision, not a ghost. Her true body, wax, bone, flame, and she was smiling. She fled into the library. Doors slammed shut behind her. Candles flared in protest. Dust rained from the ceiling. The books whispered. Their spines pulsed. Some turned toward her. Her breath came fast. Too fast. Pages flipped open. On their own. Not one book had text. Just drawings. Of mouths. Confessionals. Roots sprouting from kneeling figures. And a name repeated between them in red. Elira. 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 At the back of the room, a hidden door clicked open. She didn't touch it, but opened anyway. Behind it, stone stairs spiraled down. Cold air crawled up, and a smell, sweet rot, the kind that blooms in burial pits. She hesitated, then descended. The walls were carved with scripture, but not Latin. Something older. Script that bled across the stone, as if the letters themselves were wounded. As she moved deeper, the air thickened. Breathing became labor. The staircase ended in a circular chamber. At its center, a statue. A woman veiled in red. Her mouth was sewn shut, but from the cracks in her lips, wax oozed downward, forming a river that spilled across the floor. Agnes approached. Behind the statue was a slab of stone, flat and wide like a table. Carved above it, the first mouth was opened here. And there she saw them. Skulls. Dozens. Lined along the wall in ritual precision. Each one split vertically. Each one toothless. Something had taken their teeth. The whispering returned. Not from the walls. From the wax. It hissed her name. And then, you sang. Her knees buckled. Blood rushed to her ears. You opened the door. The wax pulsed. It began to move, not toward her. Into her. She screamed. But the sound was swallowed by the walls. When she awoke, her mouth was dry. Her skin stiff. Sticky. Cold. The wax had covered her neck and chest, forming a thin second skin. She tore at it, gasping. Above her, the statue's eyes bled. From stone. She stumbled backward, straight into a figure. Tall. Unmoving. Veiled. But not Elira. Not Avellini. This one was younger. Face burned. Mouth stitched shut. But she still spoke. Not aloud. Inside her. I was the first to sing, the girl said. Agnes trembled. Were you? The girl tilted her head. A prophet, she said. A choir girl. A mouth for her when she had none. She gestured toward the statue. Elira sang once. Before the silence. Before they sealed her. I echoed it. I became the echo. Agnes shook her head. This isn't real. You know it is. The girl stepped forward. Wax cracked along her arms like old bark. Her voice rang with something ancient. She has returned. But she cannot walk without a voice. Without a choir. Agnes turned to run, but the girl's hand caught hers. And in that moment, visions, flashes, rows of girls kneeling, bleeding from the mouth, feeding the wax, singing the hymn of silence. Avellini placing red candles into their hands. whispering blessings and a tongue long buried. Agnes fell to her knees. The girl knelt beside her. "You are the final note." "No." "Yes," she said calmly. "You will not scream. You will sing." Her hand touched Agnes's chest, and the wax surged again, into her skin, her bones, her throat, and then darkness, but not empty. A throne, a cathedral of teeth, and a lyra rising. Strasbourg no longer spoke. It breathed, but did not speak. The streets were paved with silence, coated in red wax that shimmered beneath ash and dust. What once was a city of bells and markets had become a cathedral without clergy, a parish of the dead. They danced still. Even now, 100 bodies moved in sick rhythm across the city square, barefoot, blistered, bleeding. Their arms jerked upward in devotion. Their jaws hung open in praise, but no sound escaped. They did not dance for joy. They danced for her. Elira. Agnes stood at the altar's peak, in what had once been chapel and was now her throne room. Beneath her, the red confessional pulsed like a second heart. The teeth that framed it had grown long, dripping wax like saliva, twitching at the scent of devotion. She no longer remembered the names of the saints, only their silence. The crucifix had melted. In its place, a waxen idol, veiled, breathing, alive. Avellini's body lay near the foot of the altar, fused to the stone, her final offering complete. The girls who once followed her moved now in seamless unison, part of the choir, their mouths reshaped into fluted pipes. Agnes raised her hands. The sky cracked with soundless thunder. She did not command with words. She channeled. The mothers will flowed through her like sap through bark, and the dancers obeyed. Their feet bled until the wax pulled them under, one by one, into the red tide. Each drop fed the throne, each scream muffled in wax, each soul a note in the hymn. Agnes felt it in her spine, an ache, a crescendo, an ending. This was the final dance, the fulfillment of a pact sealed in silence. When the last dancer fell, the city exhaled, and she, Elira, opened her eyes. Studio microphone frame returned, the reader's mouth. The manuscript lay open on the desk. The wax seal had cracked days ago, but he hadn't noticed when. The pages had begun to curl at the edges, as if resisting closure. The scholar sat alone. The library in Geneva was quiet, buried beneath a mountain of forgotten archives. He had come for research, Reformation texts. He claimed. What he found was this: Confessio Illyrae, a nun's journal, written in 1518, carried through flame and wax and time. He had read only fragments. He had tried to skip the silly parts, the parts about music and veils and teeth. But the words lingered. They echoed. And now the lights flickered. The candle beside him burned red. He reached to close the book, but it would not shut. The final page had changed. It no longer bore Sister Agnes's final lines. Instead, fresh ink, still wet, written in jagged, looping calligraphy. She was fed in fire. She wakes in wax. She walks again through you. Below that, a signature. Not his, but his name. Already written. Already claimed. The scholar recoiled. His breath caught. Something behind him moved. He turned toward the shelves. A figure. Veiled. Barefoot. Hovering inches above the ground. Its hands were folded. Its face, obscured by a dripping red veil. And as he opened his mouth to speak, he heard it. A low hum. At first distant. Then crawling inside his ears. Then, inside his throat. He coughed. Choked. Fell to his knees. Wax spilled from his mouth, warm and fragrant. His fingers gripped the edge of the table, but the book began to melt into the wood. His breath came slower. His chest ached. And then he sang. One low note. Unwilling. Unified. In the year of the plague, they danced until their legs split. In the year of the mother, they bled until the earth drank. In the year of her return, they read, and reading was enough. The silence after the last scream was thick enough to choke on. Strasbourg lay still, soaked in ash, blood, and wax. The dancers were gone, collapsed where they stood, their bodies swallowed into the red tide beneath the cathedral stones. Agnes remained, veiled in shadow, standing before the throne that was once a confessional. Her hands, slick with blood not her own, trembled, though not from fear. Behind her, the choir stood motionless. Wax had sealed their mouths. They were done singing. The work was complete. Elira had fed, and now she was awake. Far beneath the city, the earth shifted. Ancient stone groaned like breath from a tomb. Agnes turned her gaze upward. Her pupils, once dull, now glowed with the shimmer of candlelight. Something stirred inside her. Not a possession, not quite. Elira was not in her. Elira was through her. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flick of thought. Agnes was the vessel now. She had become the first mouth. But the ritual wasn't over. The blood was spent, the dance completed, but the voice still had to spread. That was how gods returned. Not in armies, not in flames, but in memory. Down in the catacomb beneath the chapel, the manuscript waited. It pulsed like a wound wrapped in linen. Agnes had written it in silence, her hand guided by instinct or prophecy. The pages were stitched together with wax thread, the ink made of ash and boiled marrow. The words shifted when no one looked. Names rearranged. Entire paragraphs reshaped themselves. When she finished, she wrapped it in cloth soaked with the blood of the dancers, sealed it with a red emblem carved from candle bone, and placed it where it would be found, not by a priest, but by a reader. Because reading was the new ritual. Because the hum didn't need tongues anymore. It needed eyes. In the present, the scholar sat alone in a candlelit room in Geneva. The manuscript lay open before him. He had not read much, only a few pages. But it was enough. He hadn't noticed when the wax cracked. He hadn't realized the ink was still wet. But something in the air shifted the moment he touched the final page. His name appeared at the bottom, written in red, and under it, a line he had not written. The mouth is ready. You will hum first. The candle beside him flickered and turned red. He froze. Behind the shelves, something moved. Not a footstep. Not even a breath. A vibration. A hum. He rose. The door wouldn't open. Not locked. Melted. The wax had returned to claim the room. He turned around. In the reflection of the darkened window, she stood behind him, veiled, barefoot, smiling. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. Only wax. The scholar fell. The manuscript remained open. His blood joined the ink. Within days, scans of the manuscript were discovered and shared, first by academics, then by curious readers, then by horror communities and AI narrators. They didn't know they were opening a door. They thought it was just a lost confession. The file never worked properly. Audio glitched. Pages scrambled. But every copy carried the same line. She does not knock. She is already inside. Those who listened reported hearing things after. The low hum, always underneath. Some began humming it themselves without noticing. Some stopped speaking altogether. One girl spoke only in mirrored Latin. One narrator vanished, but his voice kept uploading new episodes. Some listeners swore they could hear the candle flame breathing. In Strasbourg, a tourist touched the old stone of the cathedral ruins and collapsed. When she woke up, her eyes glowed faintly. She was barefoot, and she began to hum a single note, low, constant, and human. Her parents screamed, but she only smiled. Far away, in a convent-turned museum, A cracked painting of a nun began to melt. Wax dripped from her eyes. Her name, Agnes Lambert. And in a dream that reached across oceans, a girl with no memory stood at the foot of a red throne. She did not know the song, but she began to sing. In churches, statues began to cry wax. In schools, children drew confessional boxes with teeth instead of doors. In Rome, a priest burned copy of the text and was found days later with his mouth sewn shut, rosary wire piercing his lips. On the wall, written in blood, the wax remembers all mouths. By then, it no longer mattered who read the book or heard the voice. The hum was inside the silence now. It lived in waiting rooms, in server rooms, in breath, in the dark corners of radio static, and in the moment between a question and its answer. No one remembered Alira, but now she did not need remembering. She was known. Her name no longer whispered, only felt. Agnes had done her part, and now so had you. The candle flickers, your breath slows, and somewhere deep in your chest, the hum begins. In 1518, they danced until the wax remembered them. In 2025, they read, and the wax remembered again. The curse was not in the ritual. The curse was in the retelling. You read. You listened. Now she knows your name, and your voice is next.